Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 disturbing stories from the Nevada desert. These are tales of people who ventured into the endless emptiness and found something watching back. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The thing about inheriting property in Nevada is that nobody tells you why it's been empty for 30 years. My Uncle Gerald left me his place out past Tonopah, and I figured I'd at least drive out to see what kind of shape it was in before deciding whether to sell. The real estate agent in town gave me directions with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. And when I asked about the area, she just said the house had good bones and changed the subject. It took me 4 hours from Reno, the last hour on a dirt road that barely qualified as a road. Creosote bushes stretched out in every direction, and the heat made the horizon shimmer like water. My air conditioning gave out about 20 miles in, so by the time I saw the house, my shirt was stuck to my back and I'd gone through 2 bottles of water. The house itself was a low adobe structure, probably built in the 50s, with small windows and a corrugated metal roof that had rusted to the color of dried blood. I parked in the shade of the house, the only shade for miles, and sat there for a minute, engine ticking as it cooled. The silence was the first thing that got to me, not peaceful silence, but the kind that feels like pressure in your ears. No birds, no insects, just wind moving sand around and the occasional creak of my truck settling. The front door was unlocked. I should have questioned that, but I told myself maybe the lock had rusted through. Inside, the air was stale and hot, dust coating everything in a thick layer. 2 rooms and a bathroom, all empty except for a metal bed frame in what must have been the bedroom. Someone had left the faucet in the kitchen sink open, and a dried white ring showed where water had once dripped for a long time before the well ran dry. I was checking the bathroom when I noticed the bedroom closet was painted shut. Not just stuck, someone had deliberately painted over the seam where the door met the frame, layers of thick white paint that had yellowed with age. I ran my fingernail along it and felt how thick it was. Must have been a dozen coats at least. That's when I heard the tapping. Slow, rhythmic tapping like someone drumming their fingers on wood. It was coming from inside the closet. I stood there in that doorway, sweat running down my spine, telling myself it was the house settling, the heat expanding the wood. Except the tapping had a pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps again, over and over. "Hello?" My voice came out dry and cracked. The tapping stopped. I don't know why I did what I did next. Looking back, I should have walked out right then. But instead, I went to my truck, got a paint scraper from my toolbox, and came back. It took me 20 minutes to scrape through all those layers of paint, my hands cramping, paint chips falling like snow on the dusty floor. The whole time I kept expecting the tapping to start again, but the house stayed silent. The closet door finally pulled free with a soft crack. Inside was empty. No clothes rod, no shelves, just bare walls, but someone had carved words into every surface, hundreds of words, maybe thousands, cut deep into the plaster. The same phrase over and over in different sizes, some letters tiny and precise, others gouged out in huge frantic strokes. "Don't let it talk." I backed away slowly, that pressure silence in my ears getting worse. My mouth had gone completely dry, and I realized I could taste dust at the back of my throat, gritty and alkaline. When I turned to leave, I saw that someone had scratched something on the inside of the bedroom door too, words I'd walked past without noticing. "It sounds like them, but it's not. The sun was setting by then, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. I should have left. That's what anyone with sense would have done. But I'd driven 4 hours, and the nearest motel was back in Tonopah, another hour away, and I was so tired. I told myself I'd just sleep in my truck, leave at first light. I moved the truck away from the house, maybe 50 yards out where I could keep an eye on the building, made myself a sandwich from the cooler, drank another bottle of water that had gotten hot. The desert cooled fast once the sun went down, temperature dropping 30 degrees in an hour. I reclined the seat and tried to sleep. That's when I heard my uncle's voice calling my name. "Marcus, Marcus, I need help." It was coming from the house. My Uncle Gerald's voice, rough from 40 years of cigarettes with that slight wheeze on the exhale. He'd been dead for 3 months. "Marcus, please, I'm hurt." I sat up, heart hammering. The house was dark, no lights, no movement. Just that voice drifting out through the open front door I'd forgotten to close. "It hurts, Marcus. Please, come help me." My hand found the door handle. Some part of my brain was screaming not to do it, but that was my uncle's voice. I knew that voice. He'd taught me how to fish, how to change a tire. That was him. I opened the truck door. The voice stopped immediately. The silence rushed back in, so complete it felt like I'd gone deaf. I stood there with one foot on the ground, and in that silence I heard something else. Something breathing inside the house. Not the steady breath of a person, but a wet, ragged sound, like lungs that didn't quite work right. Then I saw it standing in the doorway. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and thin in a way that wasn't human. The proportions were wrong, arms that hung too low, legs that seemed to have an extra joint. In the moonlight, its skin looked gray and smooth, like something that lived underground. But the worst part was its face. It didn't have one. Just a flat expanse of skin where features should be, except for a vertical slit where the mouth should be. And as I watched, that slit opened, and I heard my own voice come out. "Marcus, please, I'm hurt." My voice, perfect inflection, perfect tone, coming from that thing. I lunged back into the truck, slammed the door, locked it with shaking hands, started the engine. It caught on the 3rd try, and I've never loved a sound more. I threw it in reverse without looking, bounced over rocks and ruts, the house strobing in and out of view in my mirrors. The thing didn't chase me. It just stood in that doorway, watching with a face that had no eyes. I made it back to the highway doing 60 on that dirt road, nearly rolled the truck twice. Didn't slow down until I saw the lights of Tanapa. Called the real estate agent the next morning, told her to sell it sight unseen, take whatever offer came first. She didn't ask why, just said she'd handle it. That was 8 years ago. House is still there. I looked it up on satellite images, still empty. The listing says it's been on the market continuously, but the price keeps dropping. Last I checked, they were asking $12,000 for it. Nobody's buying it. Sometimes late at night I'll get a call from a Nevada number I don't recognize. I never answer. But once I let it go to voicemail, and when I played it back, I heard my Uncle Gerald's voice. Just breathing at first, then, "Marcus, Marcus, I need help." I deleted my voicemail app after that. I tell myself it's just some weird robocall, some algorithm that pulled an old recording. That's what I tell myself. But I still hear that wet, ragged breathing in my dreams. Story 2. There's a stretch of Highway 50 they call the loneliest road in America, and I drove it twice a month for 3 years without incident. I was a long-haul trucker, and that route was my regular, Reno to Ely, then down to Las Vegas. Nothing but sand and mountains and the occasional town with a population you could count on your fingers. The night it happened, I was eastbound, maybe 2 in the morning. I'd stopped for coffee in Austin, or what passes for Austin, population like 200, and was making good time. No other vehicles on the road, which wasn't unusual for that hour. Just me and my headlights cutting through the dark. My radio died first, not static, not fading, just cut out completely mid-song. I fiddled with it, hit the scan button, got nothing but dead air across all frequencies. Then my phone showed no signal, which also wasn't weird out there. Whole stretches where you might as well be on the moon, for all the connectivity you get. But then my headlights started dimming. At first I thought it was the alternator, but the dash light stayed bright, all my gauges normal, just the headlights fading gradually until I was driving through darkness with these weak yellow beams that barely reached 10 feet ahead. I slowed down to 40, then 30, squinting at the road. That's when I saw the woman standing in the middle of my lane. I hit the brakes hard, the whole rig shuddering as I stopped maybe 15 feet from her. She was young, early 20s maybe, wearing a sundress that was too thin for the desert night. Blonde hair hanging straight down her back. She didn't move, didn't react to the truck bearing down on her. Just stood there with her arms at her sides. I grabbed my flashlight and leaned out the window. "You okay? You need help?" She didn't answer, didn't even look at me. "Miss, are you hurt?" Nothing. I sat there with the engine idling, not sure what to do. She was clearly in trouble. Nobody stands in the middle of a highway at 2 a.m. for no reason. But something about the way she stood, perfectly still, arms not swinging, chest not rising with breath. I opened my door and climbed down, keeping the flashlight on her. The beam wavered because my hands were shaking, and I couldn't figure out why I was so scared. She was just a woman who needed help. "I'm Thomas Reyes," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm a trucker. Can you hear me?" She turned her head. The movement was all wrong. Too smooth, too fast, like her neck was on a swivel. And when the flashlight hit her face, I saw that she had no eyes. Not closed eyes or missing eyes, just smooth skin where eyes should be, like she'd been born without them. Her mouth opened and I heard my wife's voice come out. "Thomas, where are you? You promised you'd be home." My wife Sophia, who I'd talked to 6 hours earlier, who was asleep in our house in Sacramento. Her voice perfect, with that slight accent she'd never quite lost. "Thomas, I need you. The baby won't stop crying." We didn't have a baby. We'd been trying for 2 years with no luck. I backed toward the truck, that flashlight beam shaking worse now. The woman, the thing, started walking toward me, not walking like a person walks, but gliding, feet moving but not quite touching the ground the right way. "Thomas, please come home, I'm scared." I made it to my cab, pulled myself up, slammed the door, punched the gas, and the engine roared, but the truck barely moved. It was like driving through molasses, the whole rig straining. In my mirrors, I could see her behind me, still gliding forward, arms beginning to reach out. Then my headlights blazed back to full brightness. The truck lurched forward with a burst of speed that nearly made me lose control. I fought the wheel, got it straight, and drove. Didn't look back for 5 miles, and when I finally did, there was nothing but empty highway. My radio crackled back to life, some country song mid-chorus. Phone showed 2 bars of signal, everything normal like nothing had happened. I called Sophia the second I had signal, woke her up. She was groggy and confused, wanted to know why I was calling at 3 a.m., just needed to hear her voice. I said, the real voice. I kept driving that route for another month. Gave my 2 weeks notice after that, told my boss I was taking a regional job, home every night. He understood. A lot of guys can't handle the long haul forever. But the real reason I quit was that 3 weeks after that night, I was driving through that same stretch, daytime this time, and I saw something at the roadside. Just for a second as I passed. A woman in a sundress, blonde hair hanging down her back, standing perfectly still about 20 feet off the highway. She was facing away from me, but as I drove past, her head started to turn. I didn't look back. That was 4 years ago. I worked local delivery now, home every evening. Sophia finally got pregnant last year. We have a daughter, Elena, 8 months old. Life is good. But sometimes when I'm driving at night, even just around town, my headlights will flicker, just for a second. And in that moment of dimness, I swear I see someone standing at the edge of my headlight beam, always facing away. Always starting to turn. Story 3. My girlfriend Priya talked me into the ghost town tour. There are dozens of abandoned mining towns scattered across Nevada, and she was writing her dissertation on Western migration patterns, so we'd planned this whole weekend trip to visit 6 of them. Take photos, collect data, that kind of thing. I'm a software engineer. I work with code, not history. But she was excited, and I figured at least it would be interesting. The 5th town we visited was called Belmont, old silver mining operation that went bust in the 1880s. There's actually still a few people living there, maybe a dozen, but most of it's abandoned buildings and rubble. We got there around 4 in the afternoon, the sun starting to sink toward the mountains, temperature finally dropping from unbearable to merely miserable. Priya had her camera and notebook, documenting everything, while I mostly just followed along carrying water bottles and trying not to step on rusty nails. The main street had about 8 buildings still standing, weathered wooden structures with empty windows like eye sockets. One of them was an old assay office, the sign barely readable. That's where we found the photographs. They were scattered on the floor inside, old black and white prints curled and stained but still visible. Priya got excited, potential primary sources, and started carefully collecting them. Most were generic shots of the town in its heyday, miners posing with equipment, that sort of thing. But one of them stopped me cold. It was a group photo, maybe 20 people standing in front of one of the buildings. Miners in work clothes, a few women in long dresses, some kids. Normal 1880s photograph, except standing at the back of the group, taller than everyone else, was a figure that didn't quite fit. It was blurred in a way nothing else in the photo was, like it had moved during the exposure. But I could make out a vague human shape, impossibly thin, with what looked like antlers or branches growing from its head. "Hey, look at this," I said to Priya. She glanced at it, shrugged. "Camera movement. That happened a lot with old equipment." I looked at it again. The blurred figure was standing directly behind a woman in a white dress. And if I looked close, and maybe I was just imagining this, it looked like the figure's hands were on her shoulders. We took the photographs with us, Priya carefully storing them in protective sleeves. Decided to camp overnight in the town rather than drive on to Ely. Priya wanted to photograph the buildings in morning light, and there was a flat area just outside town that looked perfect for our tent. We set up camp as the sun went down, made dinner on our camp stove. The wind picked up after dark, whistling through the empty buildings with a sound like voices. Priya thought it was atmospheric. I was less enthusiastic. Around midnight, I woke up needing to pee. Priya was asleep, breathing softly in her sleeping bag. I grabbed my flashlight and crawled out of the tent. The town looked different at night. The buildings were darker, more solid-looking, and for a confused moment I thought I saw light in some of the windows. Then I blinked and they were dark again, just my eyes playing tricks. I walked about 30 yards from the tent, found a rock to go behind. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, measured steps, boots on dirt, coming from the direction of the town. I zipped up fast, swung my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Empty desert, empty buildings. The footsteps stopped. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds, my heart doing double time, the flashlight beam wavering. Just the wind, I told myself. Something blowing around, a loose board somewhere. Then I heard Priya's voice calling from the town. Connor, come look at this." She was in the tent. I'd just seen her sleeping. But that was definitely her voice, echoing between the buildings. "Connor, I found something, come see." I turned back toward the tent. In my flashlight beam, I could see the rain fly undisturbed. Nobody had gotten out. "Connor, please, you need to see this." The voice was coming from the old assay office, the one with the photographs. I started walking toward the tent, moving fast, not quite running. The voice called again, more insistent, and then I heard other voices joining it. A man's voice I didn't recognize, a child's voice. More and more, all calling my name, all coming from different buildings, overlapping until it sounded like a crowd. I ran the last 20 feet to the tent, nearly tripped over a guy line, unzipped it and dove inside. Priya was sitting up, her headlamp on, looking scared. "Did you hear that? We're leaving," I said. "Right now." She didn't argue. We packed up in maybe 5 minutes flat, just stuffed everything into bags and threw it in the car. The voices had stopped by then, but I kept hearing footsteps circling the tent, getting closer. As we drove away, I looked back at the town in my mirrors. For just a second, I saw figures standing between the buildings, 20 or 30 of them watching us leave. Then the headlights swung around and they were gone. We stopped at a motel in Tanapa, didn't care that it was 3 a.m. and we probably woke up the owner. I've never been so happy to see cheap carpet and a television. The next morning, Priya opened her camera bag to check her equipment. All the memory cards were blank, every single photo from the day before gone. The photographs we'd taken from the assay office were gone too, even though the protective sleeve was still there. Except one. The group photo with the blurred figure was in the side pocket of my backpack, a pocket I never use. I don't know how it got there. And when I looked at it in daylight, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The woman in the white dress, the one with the figure standing behind her. Her face was blurred too, like she'd moved, or like something had reached around from behind and touched her face, distorting it in the moment of exposure. We burned that photograph in a gas station parking lot outside Tanapa. Priya used her lighter, and we watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. Neither of us talked about what we'd seen, and she never finished that dissertation. Sometimes, though, when I'm looking through photos on my phone, pictures of friends, vacation shots, whatever, I'll scroll past one that makes me stop. It'll be a normal picture, nothing special. But there in the background, blurred and barely visible, will be a tall, thin figure. I delete them as soon as I notice, but they keep showing up. Story 4. I was working as a surveyor for a solar company, which meant I spent a lot of time alone in the Nevada desert with GPS equipment and a 4-wheel drive truck. My job was to document terrain features, check soil composition, basically determine which spots would work best for massive solar arrays. It was good money and I liked the solitude. After working retail for 5 years, spending days without talking to anyone felt like a vacation. The site I was surveying was about 60 miles northwest of Las Vegas, nothing but flat desert and distant mountains. Company called it Site 47, which wasn't creative but was accurate. We'd already evaluated 46 other locations. I had a week to grid out 20 square miles and file my report. First 3 days were uneventful. Hot, dusty work, but straightforward. I'd camp each night in my truck, eat MREs, fall asleep looking at stars that seemed close enough to touch. Fourth day, I found the holes. They were in the northeast quadrant of my survey area, clustered in a rough circle, maybe 50 yards across. About 30 holes total, each one perfectly round, maybe 2 feet in diameter, going straight down into the earth. I couldn't see the bottom of any of them even with my flashlight. Animal burrows, I figured, maybe some kind of ground squirrel or snake den. I made a note on my survey map and kept working. That night, I camped about a mile from the holes, set up my cot in the truck bed like usual, ate dinner, was settling in to sleep when I heard the singing. It was faint at first, like it was coming from far away or from underground. A woman's voice, high and clear, singing something without words, just notes rising and falling in a melody that felt old. I sat up and looked around, but there was nothing to see, just darkness and stars and the dim outline of mountains against the sky. The singing continued for maybe 2 minutes, then faded away. I told myself it was wind through rocks or someone camping nearby, though I hadn't seen another vehicle in 3 days, but my hands were shaking as I lay back down and I didn't fall asleep for a long time. 5th day, I went back to check the holes. I don't know why. My survey didn't require detailed documentation of geological features, just terrain and composition, but I was curious and maybe a little unnerved. The holes had changed. There were more of them now. Maybe 50, and they'd formed a clearer pattern, a spiral with the largest hole at the center. That center hole was wider than the others, at least 4 feet across, and when I pointed my flashlight down, I saw something that made my skin crawl. There were handholds cut into the walls. Every few feet, carved depressions leading down into the dark. Someone had made this. The holes weren't natural. Someone or something had dug them deliberately, had carved those handholds for a reason. I backed away from the hole and nearly tripped over something behind me. It was a piece of wood, weathered gray by sun and sand. About 3 feet long, one end sharpened to a point, the other end wrapped in what looked like ancient dried leather strips. On the side, someone had burned symbols into the wood. Not letters, not any language I recognized, just geometric patterns that hurt to look at. I left it there and went back to my truck. Decided I'd work a different sector that day, come back and finish the northeast quadrant tomorrow. But that night the singing started again, closer this time, clear enough that I could almost make out words, though not quite. It was coming from the direction of the holes. I tried to ignore it, pulled my sleeping bag over my head, tried to focus on the sound of wind and the ticking of my truck engine as it cooled. But the singing kept going, and eventually I heard something else underneath it. Scratching. Distant but distinct, like someone dragging their nails over stone. I sat up and looked toward the northeast, toward where the holes were. My truck has a spotlight mounted on the roof, and I flipped it on, pointing it in that direction. For just a second, I saw something rising out of the largest hole, something pale and thin, pulling itself up using those handholds. It was too far away to see clearly, but I got an impression of wrong proportions, limbs that bent in too many places. I killed the light immediately. Sat there in complete darkness, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The singing had stopped. The scratching had stopped. Everything was silent. Then my truck rocked slightly, like something had brushed against it. I didn't turn the light back on, didn't move. Just sat there frozen, trying not to breathe too loud while something walked around my truck. Slow, deliberate circles. I could hear each footstep clearly. A soft padding sound like bare feet on sand. It circled 3 times, then stopped at the driver's side door. I was in the truck bed. The cab was locked. There were maybe 8 feet between us, separated by truck bed wall and glass and metal. Something tapped on the window. 3 taps, light and almost playful. Then silence. I don't know how long I waited. Hours, maybe. Eventually, the sky started to lighten in the east, that pale gray that comes before true dawn. As soon as I could see, I climbed over into the cab. I'd left the slider window open, thank God, started the engine and drove. Didn't go back for my equipment, didn't finish the survey, just drove straight back to Vegas, turned in my notice at the office that afternoon. The project manager was annoyed but not surprised. "Site 47, he asked. I nodded. "You're the 3rd surveyor we've sent there. Nobody finishes it." He closed my file. "We're probably going to pass on that location anyway." I wanted to ask what happened to the other surveyors, but I didn't. Didn't want to know. That was 2 years ago. I work in an office now, data entry for an insurance company. It's boring and the pay is worse, but I'm around people all day, and I never have to spend a night alone in the desert. Last month, I saw a news article about Site 47. Some geology students from UNLV went out there to study desert formation, didn't come back on schedule. Search and rescue found their vehicles, but no sign of the students. Search was eventually called off. The article mentioned that the students had been investigating unusual subterranean features in the area. I wanted to call someone, warn them, tell them to fill in those holes, but who would believe me, and what would I even say? Sometimes at night, when I'm falling asleep in my apartment, I hear singing, faint and far away, like it's coming through the walls from somewhere deep below. I tell myself it's pipes rattling or the neighbor's TV, but I still sleep with all the lights on. Story 5. My sister Jade and I inherited our grandfather's mining claim when he died. Not an active mine. He'd bought the claim back in the 70s during some uranium boom that never panned out, then just held onto it for 40 years. The claim was out in Esmeralda County, middle of nowhere, and we figured it was worthless. But Jade's husband worked in mineral rights, and he said there might be value if we could document what was there. So we drove out on a Saturday in October, when the desert heat finally became bearable. Took us most of the day to find the place, following directions from a hand-drawn map our grandfather had left. The claim was in a little canyon, walls maybe 60 feet high, with a mine entrance carved into the rock at the far end. The entrance was maybe 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, supported by ancient timber beams that looked like they might collapse if you breathed on them wrong. Someone, presumably our grandfather, had strung a cable across the entrance and hung a sign, "Keep out unstable." "Well, that's clear enough," I said. Jade was already taking photos. "We don't have to go in. I just need documentation that the mine exists, get some shots of the entrance, maybe the first few feet." We had good flashlights and hard hats. Jade had come prepared. We stepped past the cable into the entrance. The air immediately got cooler with that mineral smell that mines have. The walls showed old tool marks, and I could see rail tracks for ore cars running deeper into the hill. "This is probably plenty," I said, after we'd gone maybe 20 feet. Jade was examining the wall with her flashlight. "Hang on, look at this." There were marks on the stone, carved deep. At first I thought they were vein markers, ways miners tracked which seems they were following. But these weren't numbers or arrows. They were words. "Turn back." Over and over, carved into the wall at different heights, different sizes, different depths. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, stretching back into the darkness. "Okay," I said, "message received." But Jade had already moved deeper, her light bouncing off the walls. "Cole, there's a chamber ahead." "Jade, just look. I think there's equipment. Might be valuable." I followed her, mostly because I didn't want to stand alone in that entrance. The tunnel opened up after about 50 feet into a larger space, maybe 30 feet across. Our lights swept over old mining equipment, a ore cart, some tools, coils of cable, and in the center of the chamber, a vertical shaft dropping straight down into the earth. This one had a wooden cover that had been pushed aside and a rope ladder disappearing into darkness below. "He was still working it," Jade said, excited. "Grandpa must have been coming out here, exploring, or someone else was." I didn't like the way my voice echoed in that chamber. Jade walked to the edge of the shaft and pointed her flashlight down. "Can't see the bottom, must be deep." That's when I noticed the smell. Under the mineral scent was something else. Sweet and rotten like garbage left in the sun, coming from the shaft. "We should go," I said. Jade didn't argue this time. We both smelled it. But as we turned to leave, her flashlight caught something on the wall near the shaft. More words carved in the same desperate style. "It comes up at night." Below that, in what looked like a different, shakier hand, "Won't stay down." We walked quickly back through the tunnel, not quite running but close. Didn't talk about what we'd seen. Got to Jade's SUV, loaded our gear, and she started the engine. That's when we realized the sun had set. We'd only been in the mine maybe 20 minutes, but somehow it was full dark outside. Stars already bright in the sky, temperature dropping fast. Jade checked her phone. It was past 8 p.m. "That's not possible," she said. "It was 3:30 when we went in. We'd lost 5 hours, just gone. Neither of us had felt it pass." "Let's just go," I said. Jade put the car in reverse, started backing out of the canyon, made it maybe 50 yards before the engine died. All the lights went out, headlights, dash, everything. Complete darkness except for the stars. No, 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 Jade was turning the key, pumping the gas. Nothing, and from somewhere in the darkness outside I heard something climbing. Not walking, climbing. like something pulling itself up the canyon wall, claws or hands scraping on stone, getting closer. "Flashlights," I said. We both grabbed our lights, switched them on. The beams were weak, yellowish, barely cutting through the dark. I swept mine across the canyon walls and saw movement. Something pale shifting against the rock, too far away to see clearly, but definitely moving toward us. "Doors locked." Jade's voice was high and tight. I checked mine. Locked. The climbing sounds got louder, coming from multiple directions now, more than one of them. Then something hit the roof of the SUV. A heavy thump that dented the metal made us both scream. Something was on top of the vehicle. I could hear it moving around up there, footsteps, if you could call them that, walking back and forth. Jade tried the ignition again. The engine turned over, caught, died, tried again, same thing. Whatever was on the roof moved to the front of the SUV, right above the windshield. I pointed my flashlight up and immediately wished I hadn't. A face was pressed against the glass, looking down at us. Upside down, hair hanging down, features squashed against the windshield, but the face was wrong. The eyes were too large, set too far apart, and when its mouth opened, there were too many teeth, sharp and irregular like broken glass. The engine caught. Jade floored it in reverse, bouncing over rocks, the vehicle sliding sideways. The thing on the roof held on for maybe 30 feet, then lost its grip and tumbled off. I watched it in the side mirror, saw it land on all fours, but the way it bent, the joints were all wrong, backwards or extra or both. We didn't stop until we hit pavement. 40 minutes of rough terrain driving in the dark, Jade white-knuckling the wheel the whole time. Finally made it to Highway 95, where there were other cars and electric lights in the normal world. We filed the paperwork to abandon the claim the next week. Didn't tell the county office why, just said we weren't interested in maintaining it. Some lawyer sent us papers to sign, and that was it. But before we filed, I did some research. Found an old newspaper article from 1982 about a mine accident in Esmeralda County. 3 miners had been working a uranium claim, went down one morning and only one came back up. The survivor, they didn't print his name, kept saying something had been waiting down there, something that had been in the dark for a long time. The mine was sealed after that, but I found the location description in the article, cross-referenced it with our grandfather's claim papers. Same mine. I don't know why our grandfather kept going back there. Maybe he didn't believe the stories. Maybe he thought he could contain whatever was down there. Maybe he didn't have a choice. I found one more thing. A letter tucked into the back of his claim papers, handwritten, dated a month before he died. It just said, "I'm sorry, I tried to keep it down there. Don't go in the mine. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, don't go in. It's waiting. Jade and I don't talk about that day. We see each other at holidays, keep things light, pretend it didn't happen. But sometimes I'll catch her looking at me with this expression, and I know she's thinking about it too. Last month I drove past Esmeralda County on my way to Reno. Didn't go near the claim, stayed on the highway, but I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a new sign on the roadside, bright green BLM marker, the kind they put up for recreational areas. Historic mining site, 12 miles, with an arrow pointing toward the canyon. Story 6. The Black Rock Desert is known for Burning Man now, but there are parts of it where nobody goes, even during the festival. The far northern edge, up near the Idaho border, is just empty playa, flat, white, endless, with mountains shimmering on the horizon like they're not quite real. I was out there doing field research for my master's thesis. I'm an ecologist, studying extremophile bacteria in alkaline environments, which meant I spent a lot of time collecting soil samples in places where nothing should be able to live. The northern Black Rock was perfect, hot, dry, salty, minimal human impact. I'd been camping out there for 3 days, working alone, which was standard for this kind of research. Radio contact with my advisor every evening, plenty of water and supplies, satellite GPS. Safe as you could be in the desert. Third night, I was labeling samples in my tent when I heard the humming. Low and constant, like electrical wires, coming from somewhere outside. I unzipped the tent and looked around. The sun had just set, the playa glowing in twilight, and about 100 yards from my camp was a figure, just standing there, motionless, tall and dark against the white ground. "Hello," I called. The figure didn't respond, didn't move. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward it, annoyed more than scared. Probably another researcher, I thought, or maybe a lost festival goer wandering way too far from the event site. The playa was disorienting, no landmarks, no sense of scale, easy to get lost. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a person, it was a structure, maybe 7 feet tall, made from what looked like blackened metal rods welded together in a rough human shape. A torso, arms, legs, a head, like a crude sculpture. In the fading light, it had looked solid, but up close I could see through it, see the gaps between the rods. Someone's art project, I figured. People left weird stuff in the black rock all the time. Except the humming was coming from it. I walked around it slowly, shining my flashlight over the construction. The metal was old, rusted, but the welds looked relatively new. And at the center of the torso, someone had attached a small metal box with wires running from it into the structure. The box was vibrating slightly, producing that electrical hum. I reached out to touch it, then stopped. Something about this felt wrong. Why build something out here miles from anywhere? Why wire it up? What was it for? I backed away and returned to my tent. The humming continued all night, constant, just on the edge of hearing. I barely slept. Morning came, and the first thing I did was look outside. The structure had moved, not far, maybe 20 feet, but it was definitely closer to my tent. The white playa showed no marks where it had been dragged, just empty white crust, undisturbed, and the structure in its new location. I stood there staring at it, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Structures don't move. Someone must have moved it, except there were no footprints, no tire tracks, no signs anyone had been near my camp. I decided to pack up and leave. Research could wait. But when I went to my truck, I found all 4 tires flat, not slashed. They had no visible damage, just completely deflated, rims sitting on the playa. My hand pump was in the truck bed. I spent 2 hours pumping up the tires, sweating in the morning sun, trying not to look at the structure. But I could hear that humming, constant, coming from behind me. Finally got the last tire inflated, threw my gear in the truck, started the engine, looked in my rearview mirror as I pulled away. The structure was directly behind my truck, 20 feet away. I hadn't heard it move, hadn't heard anything but that humming. I floored the accelerator, fishtailing on the playa, kicking up white dust. Drove for 10 minutes straight, not looking back, following my GPS toward the nearest road. When I finally stopped and checked my mirrors, there was nothing behind me but empty desert. I made it to the county road, then the highway, then all the way to Gerlach before I pulled over and let myself shake. Called my advisor, told him I was coming back early, equipment malfunction. He wasn't happy, but he understood. That night in a motel in Reno, I looked through the photos on my camera. I'd taken dozens of shots over the 3 days, soil samples, landscape features, equipment setups, standard documentation. In the background of a photo I'd taken the first day I saw it, the structure, distant but visible, standing on the playa maybe a mile from where I'd found it, which meant it had been there the whole time, just too far away to notice. Gradually getting closer. And in a photo from the second day, it was nearer still. I deleted all the photos, submitted my thesis proposal without the field data, took an incomplete on the project, switched to a different research track that didn't require desert fieldwork. That was 6 years ago. I teach high school biology now in Carson City, never went back to the Black Rock, never finished that master's degree. But last year, a friend sent me a link to a blog post. Some Burning Man artist documenting weird structures they'd found in the deep playa. The post had photos of several sculptures, animal shapes, abstract installations, the usual stuff. and at the end, one photo of a humanoid structure made from welded metal rods. The caption said, "Found this about 40 miles north of the event. Weird location. Seems to move around. Saw it in 3 different spots over 2 days. Anyone know the artist?" I didn't read the comments. Didn't want to know who else had seen it, what happened to them. I just know that it's still out there in that empty white desert. Still humming. Still moving. Story 7. My brother Felix and I were rock climbing in Red Rock Canyon when we found the cave entrance. We'd been climbing there for years. Felix was training for a competition and thought we knew every route in the area, but this was new, or at least we'd never noticed it before. A narrow opening in the sandstone, maybe 3 feet wide, tucked behind an overhang about 60 feet up. "Think it goes anywhere?" Felix asked. I shrugged. "One way to find out." We'd brought headlamps and had rope for technical climbing, so we decided to check it out. The opening was tight, requiring us to crawl, but after about 10 feet it opened up into a passage tall enough to walk. Cool air flowed from deeper in, which meant there was another opening somewhere, ventilation. The passage ran roughly horizontal for maybe 50 yards, then started angling down. Walls were smooth red sandstone, unmarked except for occasional natural striations. Felix was ahead, his headlamp bobbing. "This is incredible," he called back. "I can't believe nobody else mapped this." Then his light stopped moving. "Natalie, you need to see this." I caught up to him in a larger chamber, maybe 20 feet across, and covering every surface, walls, floor, ceiling, were handprints, hundreds of them, thousands, all different sizes, overlapping, some faint and others pressed deep into the soft sandstone. They covered the entire chamber, a chaos of ancient hands reaching, pressing, grasping. "Jesus," I whispered. Felix was taking photos. "These have to be indigenous petroglyphs. This is an archaeological site." But something about the handprints bothered me. They were like the rock art I'd seen in other places, organized, intentional, ceremonial. These were frantic, desperate, and all of them pointed in the same direction, toward the tunnel continuing deeper. "We should report this," I said. "Let the rangers handle it." "Just a little further," Felix said. He was already moving toward the far tunnel. I followed because I wasn't going to let him go alone. The tunnel got narrower, ceiling dropping until we were hunched over. More handprints all around us now, and I noticed something new, scratches mixed in with the prints. Long gouges like someone had dragged their nails down the stone. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first. And in the center was a cairn, a pile of stones stacked in a cone shape about 4 feet high. Normal enough, people built cairns all the time, except this one was built around a hole in the floor. The stones had been carefully placed to leave a gap at the top, creating a kind of chimney leading down into the earth. Felix walked to the edge and pointed his light down the hole. "I can't see the bottom." "Let's go back," I said. "The air in here was wrong, too still and warmer than it should be." "Hang on." Felix picked up a rock from near his feet and dropped it down the hole. We listened. 5 seconds, 10, 15, no sound of it hitting bottom. "Holy shit," Felix breathed. "That's..." Something breathed back. From down the hole from the darkness came a sound like air rushing through a narrow space. Like lungs expanding, then contracting, then expanding again. Breathing, we stood frozen listening to it. Slow, steady breaths, each one taking maybe 5 seconds. In and out, in and out. "We're leaving," I said. Felix nodded, backing away from the hole. We made it about halfway to the tunnel entrance when we heard the breathing change. It got faster, shallower, like something waking up. We ran, scrambling through the tunnel, hunched over, headlamps swinging wildly. I could hear Felix ahead of me, his breath harsh and quick, and behind us, echoing through the cave, that other breathing, definitely faster now, definitely closer. We burst into the chamber with the handprints, and I made the mistake of looking back. Something was climbing out of the tunnel we'd just left. Something pale and impossibly long, pulling itself forward with arms that bent in too many places. In my headlamp beam, I saw fingers, too many fingers gripping the stone. We didn't stop moving. Through the chamber into the passage, crawling through the tight entrance, and finally out into daylight so bright it hurt. Felix was already setting up a rappel, hands shaking as he clipped in. Go, go, go. I rappelled down first, 60 feet in what felt like seconds, barely controlling my descent. Felix came down right after, and we grabbed our packs and ran for the parking area. Made it to Felix's truck, threw our gear in, and he drove. Didn't talk for the first 10 minutes, just drove. Finally, on the highway back to Vegas, I said, "Did you see it?" "Yeah." "What was it?" "I don't know." We never reported the cave, never told the rangers. What would we even say? But 2 weeks later, Felix called me. "Check the news, Red Rock." I pulled it up on my phone. A group of tourists had found a cave while hiking, went inside, didn't come back out. Search and rescue went in, found no trace of them. The cave entrance was sealed with concrete after that by order of some federal agency. The article included a photo of the location. I recognized the overhang. Felix moved to Oregon 3 months later, said he wanted to be near his girlfriend, but I knew the real reason. He needed to get away from the desert, from Red Rock and empty spaces and the memory of that breathing sound. I still climb sometimes, but never at Red Rock. And I avoid caves completely now. Don't care how interesting they might be, how beautiful, they can stay unexplored. Because sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up and for just a second I hear it, that breathing, slow and steady, coming from somewhere beneath my bed or behind the walls or from somewhere deep in the earth. In, out, like something patient, something waiting, something that's been down there a very long time and isn't in any hurry to stop breathing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.